2.1. Using figure 6, which one of the following statements is true? So you've got your figure, map of the world, you've got two different greens. The lighter green is where the forest used to be, and the dark green is where they are now, because obviously we've been deforesting some of the areas. So the correct answer is C. A high proportion of the original forest cover has been removed in Africa and Europe. Because as we can see, here is Africa. There is very little remaining forest left, the dark green, and again in Europe, very little dark green left. So answer is C. Question 2.2, outline one reason for the high levels of biodiversity in tropical rainforests. The word biodiversity just means plants and animals, living things. So why are there lots of living things in the rainforest? So the most common answer would be to link it to the weather. So we know that in the rainforest, it rains a lot and it's really, really warm all year round. So if we look at the mark scheme, just by saying that gets you the first point, which means that it encourages lots of plants to grow really, really quickly. So these are perfect conditions, and that'll be enough for your development point. You could also appreciate that in the rainforest, you've got lots and lots of leaves. This is called the canopy layer. So the canopy layer provides many places for plants to grow and animals to live. And it does it by offering a source of food or shelter from the rain or hiding places from predators. Or you could finally say, and again this is linked with the weather, that because it is so hot in the rainforest, the nutrients from dead leaves, or whatever it might be, dead animals, they rapidly decompose. You've got bacteria or fungi that will break the organic matter down, and it will go back into the soil really quickly, and then the plants can absorb all of that nutrients very quickly through these big roots. So because of that, trees grow very, very quickly. 2.3, using figure 6, which one of the following statements is true? So looking at the figure, you've got loads of bar charts, and this is to do with the amount of trees that are cut down, the amount of deforestation. And then you've got the red line, that is the amount of land that is protected from being cut down at all. So the correct answer here would be B. The highest level of deforestation was in 1995, and the lowest level was 2012. Bar is the smallest. 2.4, using figure 7, suggests two reasons for the changes in annual deforestation in Brazil between 2004 and 2013. So 2004, loads of trees were cut down. 2013, a lot less. So we need to give reasons why. Why is this happening? So you could say, well, as the land that is protected has gone up, the deforestation has come down. Just by simply describing that pattern, that would be fine. Maybe there's the idea that because there are less and less trees available and the rainforest is getting smaller and smaller, there is what they've called a greater awareness of the need to preserve the rainforest. So they're getting more aware that it's not going to last forever. Because of that, maybe the government have decided to have stricter controls. But you can talk about all the different ideas. For instance, instead of cutting down every tree, you can do what's called selective logging, where you only cut down the biggest and oldest trees and leave the young ones still there, keep the canopy structure still in place, and allow those to grow into the bigger trees in the future. You've also got helicopter logging, which again, it chooses the biggest trees, but instead of cutting it down and then transporting it via a lorry, you'll have a helicopter that will hover above the tree. You'll attach some rope to it, and then you'll cut it off, and then the helicopter will fly the log away, and that'll be a way to transport it. Why that is a bit more sustainable is you don't need to build loads of roads for loads of lorries. You're just using the helicopter to pick these huge trees up and putting them somewhere else. You can also say, well, the fact that maybe Brazil are developing as a country, they're in less debt, or we've got a scheme called the Debt for Nature swap. So rich countries might give Brazil a loan for millions of pounds to say, right, you don't have the need to cut down the trees now because you're not as poor as you used to be. So we're going to give you lots of money, you're going to pay us back over a long time, but your promise to us is you are going to conserve and stop cutting down the trees. You could explain maybe a couple of those ideas to suggest why they're not cutting down as much. 2.5, using figure 8 and your own understanding, explain how deforestation can have economic impacts. So we've got to use the figure, but we'll use it as a stimulus because we can include our own understanding as well. And it's basically saying, why is it bad? Explain how cutting down trees gives economic impact. So why is it good or bad in terms of money if we cut down loads of trees? So first of all, figure 8, you've got a photograph and a few facts about a mine in Brazil. You could say, well, look, if there's a mine there, that's great. It's great for jobs. We can extract, whether it is things like iron ore out of the ground or gold and copper. Great. People can work, then they can spend the money in the local area. So you've got the multiplier effect happening. But then with the taxes, the government can then improve maybe the infrastructure, the roads and the railway lines, which could also attract other big companies to Brazil because they're starting to develop. And if they do come to the country, it's going to be really easy to get from one part to the other, whether it is in terms of attracting workers to get to work or to transport goods from one part of the country to another. It says our own understanding, so we do know that it's not just mines that can bring you lots of economic impacts, but you could actually cut down the wood, cut down the trees, which is logging, trees like timber or mahogany or teak used for things like furniture, which again provides money and taxes and jobs, etc., etc. Or we could look at things like, particularly in the Amazon rainforest, a lot of the forest is being cut down and turned into farmland instead. So this could be something for cattle grazing, cows, and then companies like McDonald's then buy the cows and turn them into their burgers so they can make a profit. Or you can cut all the trees down in an area and plant smaller plants on, such as palm oil plants, things like that. So again, you're changing the nature of the environment. You are cutting down the trees, but it does bring jobs and money in lots of different ways. Now, the word impact can be used as negatives as well, but just be careful. You've got to link it to money. Don't just be saying the environmental impact. You've got to make sure you link it to how costly they are. So, for instance, we know that the mines they can use a chemical called mercury. That is bad because if that goes into water supplies, then the water can become polluted, which costs a lot to sort out and get rid of the water pollution, but also it can affect local people if they drink it. So if local people are ill, certainly the farmers, they're not going to earn money or a living, so that could really impact on them. I've got another point here. It says a lot of people that have come to work at the mines are foreign people, and they've brought diseases such as the measles, and many local people have actually died because their immune system is not used to this, for them, new disease. Again, linked to the idea, if you die, less people are working, and there's your economic impact. There could be things like maybe you cut down trees to build a mine, then those that would normally use those trees to maybe get stuff out, such as rubber, can't do their job. So yes, lots of people are earning money, but other local livelihoods are going to be destroyed as a result. So you don't necessarily need a balance here, not really what it's after, but as long as you reference the figure and a bit of your own understanding, just explain those impacts, linking it to money, that would be a good answer. 2.6, describe the role of producers in an ecosystem. So we've got a picture here, loads of different things are labelled, but we're just going to focus on the producers. For 1 mark, what's the point of them? What is the role of things like trees or grass in an ecosystem or a food chain? So looking at the mark scheme, you could have a few different answers. The producers are things or organisms that produce their own food. Again, if you go into a little bit of detail about how this happens, particularly with trees, you've got photosynthesis. So they take the energy from the sun and turn it into energy or food. You could also say, well, the producers are the first rung in the food chain, or the bottom of the food chain, and they're going to be eaten by the next rung, which is the consumer, such as in this case the rabbit. Question 2.7, give one reason why energy is lost at each level in a food chain. So why is it that a fox has to eat a lot of rabbits to sustain itself, and why rabbits have to eat a lot of grass? So why is there less and less energy the further up you go? First of all, you could say that actually it's very rare that a fox, for instance, will eat all of the rabbit. Things, or indeed the rabbit, eats all of the vegetation. So parts such as roots or stems, bones, scales, feathers aren't eaten. Therefore, you have to eat a few to get all of the energy. Or the fact that energy is used up by things like the fox because the fox moves, or it respires, it breathes, which uses up lots of energy. Therefore, energy is always lost at each level of the food chain. Point 8. Use the figure 9 and your own understanding. Complete the following sentences. So figure 9 was this one here. If a disease reduced the number of primary consumers, one effect on the food chain would be that. So in this instance, the primary consumer would be the rabbit. So let's say there's a disease that wipes out all the rabbits. What are the knock-on effects? Well, if there are fewer rabbits, then there's going to be fewer secondary consumers or foxes, because they will have less food to eat. On the other side, if there are fewer rabbits, then the primary producer, in this case the grass, is going to grow and grow because there's less rabbits to eat them. So you can talk about either side of the argument there. The second part, decomposers help to return nutrients to the soil by what? So decomposers are things like bacteria or fungi. What do? How do they ensure that if a rabbit or a fox dies, the nutrients and the food stored inside them can go back into the trees? So the key word here is they break down dead plants and animals, and it can be, ideally the word is absorbed through the roots, but the idea that they break dead matter down. 2.9, choose one of the following environments. So we would tick the cold environments box. To what extent is your chosen environment at risk from human activity? So we would either say something like to a great extent, or to some extent, or to no extent. So you've got to have some sort of evaluation in there. But we're talking about Alaska. So is Alaska at risk from humans? Well, first of all, why are humans going to Alaska? What are their opportunities? And this is where you get all your facts and figures out about fishing, particularly salmon fishing. You could be mining things like gold. You could be looking at trying to get oil out of places like the ANWR National Park. So there's loads of different reasons. But is Alaska at risk? Well, you could say yes, because the more people, the more cars are there, the more pollution, the more roads having to be built. For instance, fishing, the more fishermen that are there, the smaller the catch will be. But we have seen there are ways to manage these areas as well. So, for instance, you've got the Whaling Commission, and they set a quota, a number on how many whales that can be caught a year. So, okay, yes, there is a big threat and risk from humans, but it is being managed fairly sustainably. For instance, the ANWR, the big national park, yes, it is at risk from human activity, but again, it is managed, so only 8% of the national park can actually be developed on. So to get the sort of the level 3 answers, the 7s, 8s, and 9s, obviously talk about the reasons why humans go there, but don't forget that there are things in place to manage the situation as well, and you do need that to get the top mark.